Please.
Crazy. Thank you, guys. Well, and thanks for the introduction. So, as said, I'm the CTO of Eficode, having been working now 11 years in Eficode, having built the DevOps there. I hate introductions, but I'm going to have to tell you some things about myself, so you know some of the concept. So my day work is working a CTO at Eficode, which means growing the business in Nordics, meeting you guys, and also meeting our developers and working together closely with them. At the same time, I'm also working, I just counted them back at the lunch, roughly 5 startups currently, in which I'm mentoring or developing some code, which I do at the night time. And the motivation for that comes from the fact that when I'm working as a CTO, I have very little time to actual coding. But I really need to, well, you've seen it yourself, that in a world changing at this pace, if I weren't coding, I'd be falling off the track like in a year or 2 max. Today I'm going to be talking about the trends, and it's an actual pun, so I'm talking about the trends, as in trends, and the trends where DevOps is going. And if you get bored during my speech, you have 2 options. You pay attention to the 3 first slides I'm going to show you, and then get bored, or then start asking questions after that. So I'm going to start with what's happening with DevOps in a global scale currently. We all have been working with getting the Docker up and running some test automation. We've been learning to do unit testing, and you know that the organizations have been trying to actually get some of the business people work together with the developers and some of the ops people to come together and talk with developers how to actually release this software. And as Tuomas already presented you earlier today, we're approaching the moment where we can see through the organization what's currently happening. What's happening now? Like, where are we going? What features went out? When? When are the next features due? You get the visibility into these features are being developed, these tests fail, these features are passing, and these are the features we're going to release next. Of course, also the ops side, how are we doing in production currently? What kind of exceptions? You even have probably some kind of a Slack type of chat ops tool in place. And what's happening now is that the trends and KPIs are starting to be attached to that visibility. So you're seeing that, okay, this is what we're doing. And actually, yesterday we were doing this, and today we're doing this. A month ago, we released these. Is my speed getting faster or slower? And why? Where are the bottlenecks in my current development? So does it come from the fact that we're also working together with the hardware guys, and they have 3 months to 6 months delivery time for their IoT platform for which we need to develop and kind of release? Do we misunderstand the business and do lots of work in development before we can release, because the same business who comes back to see the features later on say that, no, this is not correct. And now, as you're getting the visibility and actually starting to see where you're heading at, 2018 will be the year when you'll start seeing to the future. You can make estimations. You can see not only just the development part or your Scrum teams or your design, you can see it as a whole. Here came the feature. Here came the business idea. Here came the exception. This is how it went to production. And these are the facts and features we're working on now, and they're going to production next month. So we're taking control. And of course, when taking control, you can attach actions and change direction, not based on past, but to the future. So that's first. Then, the next as important slide is towards zero-day delivery. As I said, trends, KPIs, control. If we see from the trends that we're going down, or some new paradigm came out, some new feature in a competitive software came out, if you can't react to that, it doesn't help you to know that, okay, we're screwed. You have to be able to react, which means that the only way to actually get there is so-called towards zero-day delivery. Of course, this doesn't mean that you would have to ship your software today. And this doesn't mean that you would have to ship the whole bunch of features tomorrow. But instead, you find ways of actually delivering in small pieces and getting the priorities right. Which means that if you actually get an exception, like if you look at how Pokemon Go just a few years ago did, they didn't expect that much of traffic to hit their servers. But alas, they did. And what they had to do to maintain their players is to find a way to immediately start fixing the problems with the performance. And if you look at one of our customers, Unity, whose software is running on 2.5 billion devices globally, how they're working on towards zero-day delivery means that they find a way of delivering the new software to only a small fraction of their users. That's also what Facebook and Google does. And it's nothing special or magic anymore. It's possible for everybody. So once we've been listening to orchestration here and Docker and stuff, that all enables it for us. Third slide. This I don't think will happen in 2018 so much, but we are going to start to see patterns towards this. So I've written AI-assisted release variations. This means that instead of having the A/B testing, which you've probably all heard of already, which means that we are having this and this target segment, and we're going to release this variation of the software to them, and this variation to the software to them, and see which one performs better. What we are going to do instead is ship variations that we decide that, okay, we're going to try this and this and this variation. So just to give an example, if you open the Facebook app, you will see that 2 people here probably doesn't have the same app running currently. That's what they do. And on the side of that, based on the traffic you collect, based on the data you collect, you can add on the side some machine-assisted ways of changing your software based on the information you collect. And that too isn't hard anymore because you don't have to invest huge amounts of time and effort in getting your operations or the cloud or your service space to actually support that. You get it from the products you already use. Cool. So 3 things. Going to control, getting to zero-day delivery, and AI assist. That's something that I see that the future this year will bring. 3 areas: management, development, and culture. I'm going to be talking about the areas one by one, explaining what's going to happen, what some of you guys already have seen that has happened in my organization, and you can be happy about that. But many of our large customers throughout the Nordics, like in car manufacturing or banking, they have just stepped into many of the things I'm going to be talking to you today. So the first one, management. You probably have seen some management slides in your organization, which in somewhere of one of the targets in the management team or the executive team has the word DevOps. And that's the first phase when you understand that, okay, our organization is finally starting to find ways of getting the whole pipeline together. So someone has told the executive team, if you say DevOps, it means right away to release. Which means that when we come up with an idea, we can try to find a way to getting into production as soon as possible. Of course, DevOps is deeper than that, but well, I'm also working in management. I know how, how that could sometimes work. Second thing from the management gives so-called sponsorship. It doesn't mean funding necessarily. It means that they are okay with the fact that parts of the organization or the piloting teams have a permission to actually start spending time or money in trying to do things in a new way. Many of the organizations here in Denmark or in the Nordics I meet, they start with saying that, okay, we have now this pilot team developing on a new feature, and they have received 4 virtual machines from the operations. And now we have a problem. We have received the business targets half a year ago, and someone should test if they are okay. Which means that the sponsorship actually means that the management starts to understand that, okay, we do need the business involvement in actually getting things done, because they can be done or discussed if they are just sent as an email by another silo or another part of the organization. And we're not going to be able to deliver them to production unless we have the operations guys actually working together with the team. So, of course, in an organization, it's going to mean investments. But they're different sorts, so it means sponsorship. And then, especially the bigger organizations, which some of you naturally represent, you will see that there is also budget allocated for DevOps activities, which means that you might already have a so-called centralized DevOps team that's trying to bring DevOps into the organization, which as a concept is a very good idea as long as it has the so-called due date, which means that if you have a centralized DevOps team doing the training and implementation and getting people work on the same board, it's okay, as long as it's not a DevOps team that will be working from today on, because then the responsibilities will be on the DevOps team and not the teams that are responsible for delivery. Development and QA. This is the thickest part, so bear with me. If you get bored, I'll just start jumping, don't worry. I see that design, meaning not only service design or software design or user interface design or user experience design or whichever, the part of design that involves the business understanding and the, let's call it user experience, but it's much more than that. Just having the understanding of the service to be created, developed further, and how and to whom. And the DevOps part, which is then making the automation. Those are coming closer together by the day. And that means that the coding part isn't disappearing. It's changing its form. So I cannot be a software developer anymore. I have to understand how to set up the operations environment, how to run the Docker containers, how to set up my Jenkins file to run the continuous integration, how to define my services in the production environment. Or then I need to understand how, say, Sketch works, how the components that the designers have put to the Sketch file should be developed as software or components. I'll come to that later. Or then I need to understand the business requirements and not just code some algorithms. That too is needed, but as said, design and DevOps are coming closer all the time. This might sound like 2001, but to be honest, I still feel that especially the bigger organizations, don't actually realize that if you want to get stuff done, you need it to be done completely in teams, in self-organized, independent teams. You've probably already seen, especially in Tuomas's and the other presentations this morning, that the DevOps world is going into so-called self-service direction, which means that the developers can allocate resources for them from some production environment, and they can just use ticketing machine like Jira or such, and then have their version control, binaries, continuous integration coming in as a service. And this means that we have kind of blocked the bad parts of DevOps to someone else so that I can work more efficiently. But it should also include the business understanding. So the big organizations think that, okay, now we have this operations environment, it's set up, we have the DevOps platform, it's given to the developers. I hope they're developing well. But it's naturally not working like that. You just need to think of also what happens before the first line of code. Many organizations that we work with, especially in kind of in the traditional or in the manufacturing areas like medical or banking or some embedded software development, we still see that the teams have testers that have just one purpose, and that's testing by hand. It's good. And if you have independent teams that have testers that test by hand, it's perfect. It's not going somewhere else, and the team has the responsibility for the development. But the problem is that the world is automation. So QA will become automated to as large an extent as possible. So if we look at the gaming, we work together with a number of gaming companies like Rovio, for example, the creator of Angry Birds. And even they can automatically test the games, even if it's not like how this game feels or can I play the game through different variations. They can already know that, okay, the game starts, it runs through like so, this is how we skip levels, and this is how we work in there automatically. Which means that the manual testing gets thinner and more valuable. And that means that the testers have to be able to also transform their tests and the value they generate into code and automation. Cool. Sharing common components and libraries. So you've probably already seen, say, Android and Google environment that they've created a library called Material UI. Many of you might have already used it in some of your products. That's a good example of sharing common libraries and components, like creating components that inherit some, say, user interface, and which can be used by others than just your organization. But I'd say the coolest example of sharing common libraries is this. So this is a Nintendo Switch, one of the controllers from Nintendo Switch, which is, of course, one of the most closed gaming environments you can find. And then Apple, which is also pretty closed. And what I can do nowadays is, without installation, to have very closed ecosystems talking to each other, which means that the kind of closed environments is past. The future is that you can connect things that you wouldn't expect to be able to connect. And then from APIs to streaming. So this is also something I want to bring up today, because I see that many are still talking about the REST APIs and testing the APIs through unit tests and requests and whatever. But if you look at any of the services you currently use as daily things, like say, Google Mail or some, like, if you're in the ops, the Kubernetes or something like that. They already work in streaming world. It means that you're going to receive information live with a two-directional binding. And that's also something that the IoT will be doing in the future. Some of the biggest IoT environments, of course, already do it. But if you look at any of the IoT solutions, it's always thought as REST API that the IoT devices is sending information in. But it's changing into two-directional connection, which is, say, socket IO or web sockets or whatever. I want to bring it here because people still talk about the APIs and requests through APIs. It's more into two-directional socket connections in the future. And then last part of the development and QA and the future there is naturally the DevOps platform, which means that some kind of an ecosystem for the whole organization is due, just so that when you're getting from piloting to actual implementation, I'm coming to that in a bit, you're going to have some kind of an environment what you can share throughout the organization to work as the basis for getting the so-called avalanche of DevOps in your organization. An SRE, if you don't know the word, it's called Site Reliability Engineer. It's coined by Google, and the idea of that is to change the concept of DevOps into having people that are actual developers, but also at the same time responsible for the ops side. There is a good book by the Google guys. You should take a look at it. So if you're handling DevOps, you should definitely get to know SRE as well. Okay, last but not least, the culture. There are three things that I see emerging. The first one, as I already mentioned, is moving from piloting to global implementation. So we work together with large organizations like the OP Bank was mentioned, and how they have this far looked at DevOps is piloting in teams. And this year, from this year on, even the big organizations in banking, car manufacturing, medical, telecommunications, they're looking into global implementation. So time of piloting has already gone. Now it's time to actually take the frightening step and start doing it for real, even in big organizations. Defining common goals and making the progress visible. So going back to the beginning, having the control means also that there is no control unless everybody is involved, which means that if you go to your organization, go to a different department and ask, what am I doing? Probably no one can ask. But what we're building with the DevOps currently, making the visibility to everything we develop and having it released real time even, it also brings in the visibility to define what I am doing and to define what we are doing and having it go all the way up to the top management. Which means that if I'm working on a Jira ticket, which might sound very detailed, it's probably connected to some other task, which is connected to some bigger strategy decision of a new product, say, or just a new feature, a new part of a new standard, maybe. And formerly, it disappeared because it wasn't visible. But now as it's visible, you should definitely also do it visible throughout the organization. And then last but not least, of course, in the culture part is breaking barriers, which means that it will take courage. But for example, splitting the business understanding to development teams is something that I see organizations are really frightened to do, because business has been so far thought of as something very centralized and high, but actually getting them to work together with the developers who basically cannot have any discussions without the Scrum Master or product owner in between is something that will have to happen in the near future, because that's the only way of getting to last slide towards the zero-day delivery. It doesn't help if the development can make the zero-day delivery. When the decision of a new feature or seeing a new trend happens, it probably happens in the business than in the development. So it doesn't help if the developers are in continuous deployment or continuous delivery. The whole organization has to be. Cool. 30 minutes tight package. Would you like to ask any questions?
What about robotics DevOps?
I don't know.
Okay, so.
No, as said, I'd look into, well, I'd need some definition to the question, of course, if it's meaning robotics or then like robotic process automation or then...
We can ask Anonymous what the meaning about robotics DevOps is.
Yeah, it actually suffices to go get yourselves to any of the car manufacturers' factories, and you'll know. So it's pretty awesome to see what's already happening in robotics. It's something that kind of I hadn't even thought of before. So that if you look at, there is a car factory making the Mercedes in Finland, and well, I'm not too big of a car fan, but the fact that they're producing a new car every 4 minutes in Finland, so that every 4 minutes a new car comes out of the factory, someone starts it and drives it away from the end of the factory line every 4 minutes. It's really awesome. Like, it sounds ridiculous, but how it happens is the same things as here. So basically we're more talking of connecting the DevOps thinking and the current robotics thinking together. We did a project to Metso, in which they create like huge factory lines which consist of different components, and there we use DevOps simply for verifying that when you put the components together in a simulator, that they actually produce the predefined output. Like, it could be like washing or chopping gravel or whatever, but we did in DevOps way the test automation in simulators before the actual factory was then built in their customer site.
So my question is simple. So every year appears new trends, new technologies in DevOps, in development, and so on. How are you validating this for like long-term things, and what do you think will be viable in the next, after 10 years, for example? Thanks.
Dude. Sorry. Yeah, I would rather say it in such a way that there are a few things that have stayed the same for a while already. We are not talking too much about lean here, but the lean thinking is like management has taken quite liking to lean thinking. And what we're talking, in my opinion, in DevOps is the set of new tools and technologies that enable lean thinking in software development in a certain way. And DevOps as a term, it might not have an expiration date, but it will become one of the kind of mainstream terms, just as agile. So I see that more than just thinking of what's the term of tomorrow, like if you look at the site reliability engineer or whatever, like the hot topics, I would say that having the thought of control and the thought of control coming from the visibility and understanding is something that we have been working towards the whole time software development has existed. And the digital transformation also enables this kind of working. And doesn't matter what term you have for it. Currently we're using DevOps because everybody here has at least 80% of the same understanding of DevOps. And if there's a new mainstream term for that, then we'll use that. But probably pretty close to these ideas anyways.
The SRE engineer, is that the same as the chaos engineering going on in Netflix?
Well, I think it's pretty close, but the SRE is more as a definition of a person's daily work from that perspective, like trying to approach the development and DevOps from the person's perspective. Yeah.
My question, another question. As I understand it, you're not only providing the set of tools, but also the team which is supporting it. And there's some experienced DevOps engineers who are able to work on the external projects. So, and the question, what are you investing in the education of your engineers? So what is, for example, if you hired a new joiner in your company, what these guys should study in the next year to be able to work in your company?
Yeah, this is a very good question because I'm happy to answer this. This is actually something that I do as a CTO. Thanks. We've pressed through 20 master's theses last year. So our company produced 20 master's theses last year. And since we hired 100 people, it means that 20% of the people basically hired have made their master thesis at Eficode, which means that when we pick the topics, they unsurprisingly touch DevOps, which means they could be anything from like container technologies or implementing orchestration or test automation, business thinking of DevOps, whatever. And that's one of the ways we do it. And the other thing which I propose to everybody of you is that we have Friday afternoons free, which means that people gather to our office and there's training and there's collaboration on a very free level, which means that people come from their customer projects, share their ideas after the training and see if they've come up with something new that could be shared throughout the organization. Also, free beer. Yeah, and sauna, of course. Cool. Thank you so much. Once again, you're welcome to chat to me later. I'll let the next ones.
Give Marko a hand.